What if the person you've labeled your biggest opponent actually holds the key to your eventual success? I mean, it sounds nuts, it sounds completely counterintuitive. But transformation expert Adam Kahane discovered exactly this while working on huge social change projects, like trying to address apartheid in South Africa. His biggest insight? You need far less agreement than you might think to make real progress. We're taught to seek alignment and eliminate resistance. But what if that's the key to unlocking the very best of what's possible in this project? On this episode of Change Signal, we are diving into radical collaboration. It's messy, it's confusing, it's hard, it's incredibly powerful. It's time to unlearn everything you thought you knew about resistance. I'm Michael Bungay-Stanier. This is Change Signal, the podcast for people who lead change, transformation, and growth in organizations. Our goal? To cut through the blather and the BS and the noise to find the good stuff that works. Change in organizations always comes with its own drama, no doubt. But to be honest, less than the drama that comes with social change, where the stakes can feel higher and the positions more entrenched. To put it bluntly, it's one thing to do a reorg, it's a whole other thing to try and figure out apartheid. And I think there's a great deal to learn from people who work in that space of social change.
With what I'm calling radical collaboration, the upside is you could do something much bigger with a much broader group of people, including people you don't agree with or like or trust, and it's going to involve more conflict and more unpredictability and more sense that I'm not getting people to do what I want them to do.
Adam Kahane is one of the very best teachers and speakers on transforming social systems at all scales, from organizations to countries. He's the director of RIOS, an international change management consultancy focused on human-centered design. He cut his teeth doing scenario planning in the famous and influential Royal Dutch Shell Change Group. And in fact, in the Margaret Heffernan episode, one of the first episodes of the podcast, in her most recent book, he gets a shout out. Adam is the author of many books, including Collaborating with the Enemy, How to Work with People You Don't Agree With or Like or Trust, which honestly is a fantastic subtitle. This is a great conversation with one of the quiet influences in this space. Adam, welcome.
Thanks, Michael.
Was there a moment that shaped your work in change?
During the time I was at Shell, we got this invitation out of the blue from a group of academics and political activists and business people in South Africa that were trying to think about the transition from apartheid to democracy and wanted to use a specific methodology that Shell was famous for, the scenario planning methodology, and wanted somebody to facilitate that.
Yeah.
And as I was the youngest and most expendable member of the department, I was dispatched. And I found myself in a situation I'd never been in before. I didn't even know such a situation existed, which is in a room full of people who knew much more about the situation than I do. I had no idea what they ought to do about it. And they didn't agree on what was going on or what needed to be done about it. So I arrived with what was for me an unusual level of respect and humility. And I described that experience as like a dark night where there's a bolt of lightning and you can see it all at once, but just for a second. And so that's it, that I saw all at once what it meant to play this other role, and and then forgot and relearned it and forgot and relearned it. And so that's what I meant by erratically. But I think what's always been obvious to me, in spite of my arrogance or attachment to the expert status, is that on anything I work on, and I've done this work now all over the world on all kinds of issues, I'm always working with people who understand it better than I do.
When I was rereading your works, I was like, there's so many things that we could pick. But I'm wondering if I was to back you into a corner and say, Adam, if you could just teach me one thing, one core idea around change, what's the idea you'd want to share?
That probably we can change more things than we think we can in the world around us, in our family or community or organization or a larger system. But we won't be able to do it unilaterally, and we're probably not going to be able to do it just with our friends and colleagues, people we agree with and can trust.
Just to jump in, I just want to point to the tension. It's a delightful tension, really. Adam's saying on the one hand, well, look, you have less control and there's less place for expertise than you might think, you might hope. On the other hand, you can change more than you think you can. You're underestimating how much change you can make. I just think that's a wonderful, provocative, powerful combination. But for it to be true, it does demand one core capacity of you.
It's probably going to require us, at least some of the time, to work with people we don't agree with or like or trust.
Yeah.
Strangers or opponents or people we think of as enemies. And so the big idea is that often that's what's needed, and it can be done, but it doesn't look like how we think collaboration ought to look like.
Right.
It's not going to be harmonious or predictable or under control. And so we have to change our idea or our understanding of what collaboration in the real world looks like.
You know, if I'm a change leader listening to this, when you say, look, it's not going to be harmonious or predictable or under control, I get shivers of fear up and down my spine because I'm like, I like harmony and I like predictability and I like control. So help me understand this re-understanding of what collaboration really needs to be when it's beyond just you working with the people who you know and you like and you're all agreeing anyway. So it's not even collaborating. It's just you all happen to be walking on the same path together.
Yeah. Well, I also like more than average harmony and predictability and control. So I put it this way. You can stick to that if you want.
Yeah.
You can collaborate with people who are on your team, only with people who are on your team and are willing to put aside their differences for the sake of the success of the team and keep things under control and harmonious. But you're going to end up being able to do less, or that's only going to work within a narrow scope.
Right.
So if you want to do something bigger than that with more diverse people who are not subordinate to you,
right,
then you're going to have to do this other way of collaborating, this unconventional, uncomfortable way of collaborating that I call stretch collaboration or radical collaboration.
What are the stretches in radical collaboration?
One main thing you have to do is to feel your way. You're not going to be able to figure it out before you start.
Right.
You're not going to be able to have the right answer and get everybody to agree to it. You're not going to be able to tell people what to do. You're going to have to feel your way. What do we agree on? What do we not agree on? What do we have in common? What's different? What can we try next? What's my role in this? And I could describe those as different things, but I've been thinking today that overall it's about feeling your way forward rather than, now this is becoming clear to me just as I say it, rather than you think about it, you get agreement on it, and then it's just done.
If Adam wasn't as experienced and as successful as he is in his work, this might sound a little woo-woo. It certainly does to me a bit. But I'm realizing as I sit here, perhaps this is what mastery can look like. The challenge is, it's not just your level of comfort that you need to deal with. You're making me nervous about predictability and being able to see a little bit into the future. But also you're making me nervous about how do I manage my stakeholder? How do I manage my C-suite who I like plans. I like outcomes. I like knowing what's going to happen. Do you have any guidance around how to manage the stakeholders who just aren't into this whole emergent process?
I gave up a long time ago trying to get people to do things they don't want to do. If you're somebody in a C-suite and you think you can just make it happen, maybe you can. Go for it.
Yeah.
But I think lots of people already know that they're going to have to figure this out as they go along, and they're going to have to work this out with others as they go along.
See, I love that.
And that doesn't mean it's not useful to do a calculation or have a plan or have a hierarchy. We know, and how could we not know, living in 2025, that the situation we're going to be dealing with and the people we're going to be dealing with keeps changing. and that we're in an unfamiliar and unpredictable context.
You talked about the meta stretch in radical collaboration. Underneath that umbrella of you need to be in it and it needs to unfold, what else do I need to know about this wider, broader, messier, more inclusive, less predictable sense of what collaboration is?
To be practical about it, I think the way to start is to step back and say, what am I trying to do here? And who do I need to work with to be able to do that?
Right.
And that might be the people you're already working with. It might be your colleagues, but it might also be people who are outside your circle or outside your department or outside your organization. And it might be people who agree with you, or it might be that I really need to work with Jill and she's got the critical part of this and I don't get along with Jill, or Jill sees this completely differently, or Jill's focused on something different from this. And so then the question, which I think is the practical question, how can I engage with Jill? How can I understand how she's looking at this and what she's trying to do and where there might be something we can try together?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the practical place to start, with who do I need to and want to and am able to work with.
Got it. Not,
I've got these people, they're my friends or my colleagues or my subordinates, so let me see what I can do with them.
You know, one of the insights you shared as I was reading your book, Collaborating with the Enemy, you were talking about a time when a process had not gone particularly well. The people you were looking to work with had rejected your premise. And these are my words, but you talked about this sense of tightening up and a feeling like you want to take more control rather than less control in that moment when things go wrong.
Yeah.
What have you learned about how to... I guess how not to tighten up, how to stay in that place of giving up some sense of control and certainty, even when your little amygdala brain is going, take control, seize it, push people around, because under stress, that's what our brain is telling us to do half the time.
I'm not sure I've gotten any better at not tightening up.
Right.
But I think what I've got better at is noticing sooner that I'm tightening up and that I can relax.
Yeah.
So rather than taking me a year to figure it out, maybe I can do it in a month or a week or a few days and say, oh, wait a second here. This isn't working. I'm trying to force it to be the way I want it to be. It's not working. Let me see what else I can do. And the word I use for that in that book is enemify.
Yeah.
This process of turning these people who aren't going along with you or aren't agreeing with you or who you don't like or trust, rather than them just being people doing their thing, which is usually what's happening, or just opponents, to making them enemies that have to be defeated or destroyed. And that's what I worry about, that process of enemifying.
Right.
Because that's when things become impossible.
This creating the other, creating the enemy, I'm wondering how that strikes you in this moment. You might not have really blatantly labeled somebody as the baddie, the enemy, your nemesis. But what person or maybe group of people have you more subtly tagged as against you or resistant or unwilling? As you understand that kind of system of people who you might want to work with or have in the literal or metaphorical room with you, if you notice that you've kind of enemified some of these people, you've already written them off or ossified them as a kind of anti-person, how do you soften towards them?
The thing my colleagues and I do that people like best is the very simplest thing. And the simplest thing is the following. We're going to have lunch now. Why don't you look around the room, find the person most different from you, who you never thought you'd talk to, and just go for a walk with them.
Yeah.
And people giggle a little bit and look around the room and lock eyes with somebody and go for a walk with them. And they always say, man, that was the best part of the workshop. That's much better than all these exercises.
Yeah.
Can we just have another walk? Because this really helped.
Yeah.
So I started to wonder, what's with the walk? Why is it so productive? And The first answer that was suggested to me was, well, there's a mechanical thing. You don't have your phone. You don't have your computer. You're walking through the world side by side. You're looking in the same direction. You're encountering obstacles and choices, and you're figuring out what to do about them. And that's certainly part of it. But a Mexican colleague of mine, a Catholic theologian, said to me, Adam, that's not the big thing.
Huh.
The big thing that is when you're walking with somebody, the sequence is important. Firstly, you're just a fellow human being traveling through the world,
right?
Encountering them and talking about the workshop or this dumb facilitator or your family or what's going on in the country or whatever you're talking about. And secondly, you might conclude that, well, this person's different than I thought, and they think something's different, and maybe we could do something together I didn't think we could. She said this order is important. She said it's the opposite of the Catholic confessional, where first you have to admit you are wrong, and then you can be readmitted
right
to the communion. And so I think that is maybe not the answer, certainly an answer, which is connect as humans.
Yeah.
And that's how you soften. You say, oh boy, I still don't really agree with this person. I do. I see now what some of what they're going through professionally or personally. And I get where they're coming from. And okay, then let's see what we can do. We may still not agree, but we at least are not mortal enemies. We're fellow humans dealing with the world we're walking through. But the point I want to emphasize is this doesn't mean you're going to agree.
Right.
That's important because most people, I think one of the big mistakes, one of the truisms that I think is an error is that until we agree, we can't do anything together. And this is not so.
I mean, as I read Collaborating with the Enemy, this felt like the radical aha for me about radical collaboration, which is how little you need to agree, be aligned on, be the same as, to still try and get some stuff done together.
Yeah. And this is what's become clear to me in the rewrite is this idea that there's people we agree with who are our friends, who are on our side.
Yeah.
And then there's the other people we don't agree with who are our enemies, who must be defeated or eliminated. This is really a bad idea.
Right.
There's no limit to how bad that can get.
What else do I need to understand about radical collaboration and this sense of stretch?
I think the most basic thing to understand is that when we're enemifying, when we're all upset about what those other people are doing, we're focusing all our energy on them and what they're doing and what they ought to be doing, which is most of the time an absolute waste of time.
Yeah.
And for me, what calming down equals is, okay, fine, they may be that, they may be this, whatever. What is my part in this, and what can I do differently, and what shall I do next? That's the only thing that matters.
Adam, could you talk to me a little bit about one of the core distinctions in your work, which is what is power and what is love, and how are they interrelated?
Yeah, thanks for that, Michael. It is something I've been thinking about for a long time. I read something interesting by Martin Luther King Jr. He said, power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power by itself is reckless and abusive. If I'm just trying to realize myself regardless of what's going on around me, then it's reckless and abusive at best, genocidal at worst. I'm just doing what makes sense to me.
Yeah.
To hell with the impact on other people or the world. Love is the drive to unite the separated, the sense that we're part of something larger. And then again, King said, love without power is sentimental and anemic, just talking about how we're all one without a sense of, but who's going to do what and why and how's it going to move them forward, is sentimental, anemic at best, and at worst, cynically reproducing of the status quo. And then the third part, which is what I'm trying to put together in this new book, is justice, which is about how do we relate to one another so that power and love can express themselves? What's the reciprocity or fairness? So I know that's very abstract, but I think for change agents, if you don't understand how these three, I would say, universal human drives show up in human systems, in your organization, in your community, in your nation, then you are going to constantly misstep. And so I think that's the basic ABCs of teams and collaboration and organizations and changing them.
Some people will go, look, I'm a kind of a love person.
Yeah.
That's my vibe, man. And then there are other people who are like, I'm not interested in this touchy-feely, woo-woo love stuff. I'm more about the control, get stuff done, actualize kind of power stuff. If I'm a change leader listening to this, my bet is you already know where your bias is. And in some ways, it feels like the work is to more fully integrate the other part of it into the work you do. It's like, do you have any guidance on how you become more integrated?
I think the way these are characterized makes them sound more esoteric than they are.
Right.
I once had a session with a group of professional change agents. It was in the Netherlands. There's a profession in the Netherlands called interim managers. It's people whose job it is to manage a team or an organization for a while because it's a special project or somebody's on leave or they haven't filled the position yet. So these are professional managers.
Right. Managers for hire.
And we were talking about exactly this. And one of them looked at me and said, that's all I do. That's all there is. That's 100% of it. I have to figure out as a manager, how do I work with each person as an individual with what they're going through or what they're trying to become and how they fit together and make a whole of it. So the point is, I don't think this is esoteric at all. And the justice part of it is just saying that the nature of the relationships matters. It's not the only thing that matters, but it matters. And if people think they're being treated unfairly, then you're not going to get very far. So yes, I'm arguing that any change agent who wants to be successful, who wants to understand what's going on and influence what's going on, needs to be aware that there's these three drives in every human person and every human system.
In this conversation between us now, what needs to be said that hasn't yet been said?
I think what's implicit but hasn't been said and needs to be said is that this really matters now. That our capacity to work together across difference rather than stay just with our people and to hell with the others. There's really no limit to how bad the second can be or is becoming. So I think learning how collaboration across difference works and what's needed to make it work, this really matters.
For people who want to know more about you and your work, where do they find you in the world?
You can find me at adamkahane.com and riospartners.com and my books.
Indeed.
6 of them now.
Bravo.
The 6th will be coming out in April, Everyday Habits for Transforming Systems. The question that book tries to answer is, we know that changing systems is a collective activity, but what do each of us have to do, not just occasionally, but on an everyday basis to be able to contribute to that? Maybe we should have another conversation about that, Michael.
Maybe we should. But Adam, this first conversation has been wonderful. Thank you.
Very good.
Now, if I was to sit with your change project right now, where would I see the love? Where would I see the power? Where would I see the justice and the fairness? And I know that's not where I start. I tend to kick off these things thinking about vision and plans and status quo and where are my leverage points and what are my resources. But as Adam names these 3 things as essential drivers of humanity, it occurs to me that without them, a change project is barren. And maybe, in fact, it's in the dance between love and power and justice. That's where you draw the vision from. That's where you find your leverage. That's where you untap resource. Now, if you're a first-time listener to Change Signal, welcome. It is so nice to have you here. There are more episodes to be found. I hope you will work your way through the backlist. I'm curious to know which episodes really strike your fancy. And if you're a regular listener, welcome back. I really appreciate you continuing to tune in. I appreciate it, particularly if you've given a review or some stars, or perhaps mentioned and shared an episode with somebody in your life. We grow best by word of mouth, and that social proof of a review and so on is really helpful as well. If you've not yet signed up for the newsletter at thechangesignal.com, please do. It's worth checking out. It's short, it's weekly, and it's wise. Meantime, I'm glad you're here.